Welcome to Reimagining Theological Education Together, where we talk about theological education from all sectors and from around the world, and we consider how to reimagine it to strengthen God's people, the church, for gospel mission. Today, we are here with a very special guest. We have Bill Taylor with us. I call him Guillermo Taylor, Spanish name for William. And Bill, it's such a joy to be with you, and thank you for making the time. I know you just flew up to Dallas today, so
I drove up from Dallas.
So you drove up to Dallas.
That's right.
I flew in from Baton Rouge, so
we made it.
Yeah, so we're here together now, and Bill has been a dear friend of mine and a mentor over the last number of years. And Bill, you have a background that is extraordinary. Rich when it comes to missions, involvement with missions, involvement in theological education at different times and different ways, and your mentoring roles that you've played over the last more recent years as well, and writing and publishing and all sorts of things that you've been doing over the years. Can you tell us briefly about your work with the Mission Commission of the World Evangelical Alliance? And maybe we could explain even what all that is, because there may be some here that are watching, and for them, they have no idea what a mission commission is. They might not know what a commission is. They might not know what the WEA, World Evangelical Alliance, is. So maybe if you could just bring us into the know a little bit about the Mission Commission and the WEA, and then just kind of flow into what was your role with that over the years?
Yes. Globally, within the evangelical worldwide community, there are two major movements that bring together evangelical voices and leaders.
Right.
One is Lausanne, that has the higher profile. But the older one is World Evangelical. It used to be Fellowship, and then in 2002, I think, was changed to Alliance. On the ecumenical side, you have the World Council of Churches,
Correct.
Geneva, and that whole.
Correct.
That's a different thing.
Yes.
So World Evangelical Alliance is a global alliance of, Mike, I'm not really sure, 160 national alliances?
You know what? I was just with the new General Secretary, and he used the number, I believe, 162 is the number.
Well, I was close.
So you were pretty much spot on.
So in the United States, it would be the NAE, National Association of Evangelicals. It would be that member.
Right.
In Guatemala, it would be La Alianza Evangélica Guatemalteca, the Guatemalan Evangelical Alliance. And then there are regional bodies. There is Latin America, Caribbean, South Pacific, Asia, Europe, Africa, North America.
Yeah.
And up until this year, where some major structural changes have been recently made, WA had a series of subsets or teams or entities that served the broader purpose of WA.
Correct.
So there was the Theological Commission that was concerned with global theological issues. When I began working with WA in '86, the Religious Liberty Commission had a massive impact. And then there were others, Women's Commission, Youth Commission.
I know there's one on peace and reconciliation.
Yeah, and that's a more recent
one.
Right.
Yeah, sure, yeah.
So I led for 20 years as its director, the Mission Commission, which was primarily designed to convene leaders of the global mission movement. And in those days, it was first, second, third world.
Yeah.
And now it's majority, minority world or other categories. So when I moved into leadership, I confess I had no idea what World Evangelical Alliance was. I am very serious. I showed up in Singapore in June of '86 at the invitation of Dave Howard, then the international director. And within 24 hours, I was asked if I would take this position. I had no idea, but God was there.
And at the time, you were living in Arkansas,
I was living in Arkansas.
So you fly back to Arkansas and tell Yvonne, your dear wife Yvonne, guess what I'm about to start doing.
That's right.
Yeah, okay.
We lived on a street named Land's End, which I thought was fitting because we were still in the process of grieving our departure from Latin America after 17 years.
And we'll get to that too.
But when I called Yvonne from Singapore and I said, hey, I've been asked, she said, make no decisions until I speak with our intercessor team. I called her the next day, which happened to be our anniversary, and she said, well, what is your thinking? I said, I've accepted, and I will be presented tonight. And the phone just went dead silent, Mike. And I said, are you there? She said, yes. Everyone on your intercessor team says, do not make a decision.
Okay.
Happy anniversary. Goodbye.
Oh, my goodness.
So I called Dave Howard, the den head. I said, Dave, call my wife, please. You're the only one who can save this. But it was my joy to be mentored by men.
And you're still married after all.
I am. I'm 58 years of marriage.
We survived that,
and 60 of cross-cultural ministry.
Yeah.
But I was mentored by men from India, from New Zealand, from England, from the U.S., from Latin America, and men who were significantly older than I, because I was 45 at the time, who said, Bill, you need help, and I think I can help you.
Yeah.
And so little by little things emerged in terms of what would be a global agenda, and then God was present.
When I stepped into the ISET role, you helped me with that. But as you stepped into the mission commission for the WA, not really knowing a whole lot, I sort of had the same experience stepping into ISET, and it takes a while, doesn't it? It takes a few years to really get a sense for what is this global ministry all about, and how do I navigate through all of it?
Yeah. I think one of my complications also, Mike, is that I was raised in a missionary subculture that was suspicious of anything with the word world.
Yeah.
It's ecumenical. It's of the devil. It's of the enemy. But this is world evangelicals.
Yeah.
Well, so one of the first things that just collapsed was that pseudo-separatism. When I realized that here are men and women, younger and older, who passionately and intelligently love God, are committed to the local church. And when they found out I was from Dallas Seminary, they said, oh, it's so good to have you with us. And none of them raised their eyebrows or had any question. And I was never, because my immediate supervisor was a Methodist bishop. The president of the WA at that time was a convert from Islam, Assemblies of God Canada, from Nigeria, serving in Kenya. And I realized I have this plethora of this is the body of Christ. And one of the things that Yvonne and I have observed as we look back over those 3 decades is that we discovered and were embraced by the global body of Christ.
That's great. That's great. We'll get back to the WA some more and the Mission Commission along the way, but I want to sort of frame a question that I want to ask you, because I know, so you had 20 plus years as leading the Mission Commission for the WA, which we have just talked about, but you've also been involved in theological education over the years, and whether it be in Latin America or here in the U.S. and so on. So maybe briefly tell us your involvement over the years in terms of your different roles that you've played, different things that you've done in the theological education space.
Yeah. A clarification, I led the Mission Commission for 20 years, and then I served it as senior mentor for another decade. So it was 30 years.
Yeah, in my mind, I had 30 years.
Yeah, it's 30 years, but 20 leading this unknown creature.
Yeah.
And God just met us.
Sure.
But in terms of DNA and this kind of background, I'm a third culture kid, born in Costa Rica, of missionary parents, raised in Costa Rica on dirt streets, and I flunked second grade because I flunked second grade, and my parents, where were my parents when I flunked second grade? And then, a few decades later, I got a PhD in Latin American studies.
Yeah, so. I know, right. But how do you flunk second grade? I mean,
well, it's very easy to flunk second grade in Latin America if you know how to speak Spanish, but you don't know how to read or write it. You see? And I didn't know that was an issue.
Okay.
God delivered us.
All right.
So here's a principle, actually, that I picked up here at Dallas Seminary from Haddon Robinson. And I don't know what it was and what class it was, but it was this thing that just stuck, that you make a decision, and that decision turns around and makes you. So as a child, I came to faith in Christ in Spanish in Costa Rica. As a child in Wheaton, Illinois, where my parents returned to finish off college, my dad in particular, the only inexpensive activities for children of missionaries were VBSs. And so my parents sent me to 3 one summer just to keep little Billy active. And in one of these VBSs at First Baptist Church in Wheaton, Illinois, the emphasis was on missions. And then the teacher, I think it was a lady, she said, "Are there any boys and girls here who, when they grow up, if God wants it, you would be willing to be a missionary?" And I didn't know. Do I stand up? I think I raised my hand, but it was years, Mike, before I realized that my parents were missionaries.
Yeah, isn't that something?
And so I think that was the Lord protecting me from doing something that my parents wanted me to do, that would really feel proud if we kept this generational thing going.
Yeah.
But that then turned into a long process. Finishing high school, I went to Moody Bible Institute, University of Illinois. The day I registered, I found out that I was a citizen of the United States, but of no state. So all my money went in one semester, everything I had for the rest of college. And then I finished at North Texas University.
Okay.
So I had finished Moody, I'd finished the university, but I knew I was no more ready to go into long-term cross-cultural service than to fly to the moon. And that's when God led me to seminary, to Dallas. Now, I applied as a special student that would be exempt from taking Greek and Hebrew.
How about that?
That did not fly.
Yeah.
That did not fly. Don't try it, my good friends. It doesn't work. So I was just told, study it for a year, see what happens. You will not have wasted your time. And it was during those 4 years in the THM, which was the only program, and they were all men's. It was like a Protestant monastery, seminary for men. That my calling, the vocatio from the Latin, the root word behind calling, emerged here. The occupation crystallized in my last year. So the vocatio was a calling to transformational discipleship. That it would be then exercised in formal theological education came later. So that led 3 years on university staff in this country first, and then I married a Texas girl, Yvonne Diacutis, from Dallas, and then we were in Costa Rica for a year, and I started teaching at the seminary.
At Seteca.
At Seteca, the Seminario Theological Centroamericano, Central American Theological Seminary, and we were assigned to the seminary for 17 years.
And so you taught there for 17 years.
Well, we were assigned.
Assigned.
Because 1 year was language study for Yvonne in particular.
Yeah.
And then I was given permission to do a PhD in Latin American studies because I felt this prodding of the Spirit. We are a seminary in Guatemala, but the DNA of the plant, the soil, and the pot is North America. So what does it mean to become a seminary whose DNA, soil, and pot is Latin America.
Who was the president of SETECA at that time when you?
You know, there were three people that were instrumental, because there had been a Bible Institute for 90, now, right now, it would be 96 years, or so.
Right.
The Bible Institute. And that was in the spirit of the hundreds of Bible institutes that were founded worldwide, with the model of Christian Missionary Alliance and Moody Bible Institute, that Bible Institute movement. So the seminary was a vision of Antonio Nunez, Al Platt, and then my father, who was the president of the mission.
Okay.
I think
Central America Mission.
It was then Central America Mission, then Camino Global. Now it's folded into Avant.
Right.
But my dad and Al Platt were the only Americans who said there's a future. The first year, 5 students came. Only 2 came back the second year. The second year, no new people came.
Goodness.
So it was, God was purifying.
Sure.
So I was there until 1985.
You also had some time over at TEDS.
Yeah.
Up in Chicago. And I know it was a short time there, but tell us briefly about that stint at TEDS for you.
Yeah, it's peculiar. Somebody said you only understand life in the rear view mirror.
Yeah.
So I'm looking back and say, oh, that's how that fit. But I over the course of the years in Guatemala, I had received 12 invitations to do something in the United States.
Right.
Well, I took them all as tests of my call to Latin America. Would you be the founding pastor of what's today a mega church? And I said, no. Internally, I said, I'm not going to stoop to be a pastor when I can work in Guatemala. Until about the 12th one, Yvonne said, I have a thought. Are you resisting the Holy Spirit?
Wow.
Or is he inviting you to do something that you really don't want to do? And to do it means that you're going to have to pay a cost that you never had to when you went to Latin America, because you went back to Latin America. I'm the real missionary of this family.
Wow.
It was sort of like that. It was an interesting conversation. So,
oh, goodness.
It turns out that my missions prof here, George Peters, a man nobody understood, who spoke English with a Russian, Ukrainian accent, whose high school diploma had the signature of Lenin on it.
Oh, my goodness.
Whose Mennonite family immigrated to Mexico. The U.S. did not let them come. They were shipped in sealed boxcars from Mexico to Canada.
No way.
Yeah.
Oh, gosh.
So he was the missions prof. So I took the only required course.
Yeah.
And I took an elective. And I got a C for the course. I'm the professional. Oh,
I'm a missionary.
And that was a humbling.
Yeah.
But the fact of the matter is that I didn't understand Peter.
Yeah.
I didn't understand the textbooks we were reading. This is just beyond my. I'm back in second grade.
What was it about that you didn't understand?
It was theologically dense, and I was raised on. Missions is the Great Commission reduced to 2 words: "Go ye."
Yeah.
King James.
Yeah.
And so, if the missionary task is reduced only to proclamation, then we don't have to think theologically about it, do we? At any rate, it was Peters, I found out, who told Walter Kaiser at Trinity, there's a Dallas grad who's in Guatemala that I think you need to invite.
No kidding. Even though you got a C in his class.
but we still have the gift he gave us at our wedding. So, there's certain things you do remember. And I found that out much, much later. Because I almost came to Dallas Seminary. I was here on a testing semester in 76, and a prof whom I shall not mention said, Taylor, I know they want you here, but I'm going to be blunt and say you shouldn't come because you're not really shaped. If you come here, you need to be fully shaped so you're not misshaped.
Oh, my goodness.
Oh, Is that a prophetic word?
Oh, goodness.
So in 82, I accepted, with the agreement of Yvonne, the kids, came along, a one-year test at Trinity in missions.
Yeah.
And one of the courses they assigned me was Intro to Missions, which none of the profs liked to teach because students didn't like the course because they were required to take it.
Okay.
And so I said that these are the people that I want to
Yeah.
talk to.
Yeah.
And so God met us. It was phenomenal. On the 8th of November of 1982, I was teaching on what was called Third World Mission. Missions from Africa, Asia, Latin America, but it was Third World Mission. In the middle of my class, I felt the Holy Spirit saying, Taylor, you've not done anything in Latin America for this missionary vision.
Wow.
You can't come to Trinity until you've done something in Latin America.
Oh, my goodness.
So I was stunned.
Right in the middle of class.
Right in the middle of class. I said, do I continue teaching the class? I went home immediately. We were all ensconced in a very, very small international students 2-bedroom apartment with the 3 kids in one room. The quiet room was the bathroom. And I said, Yvonne, strange thing happened.
Yeah.
She said, the kids are going to be excited.
Yeah.
So we announced it, boom, we go back. But I made a deal with God. I negotiated with the Almighty. And I said, I will come to the United States permanently, but you've got to do these 6 things in Guatemala.
Right.
Number 1, the seminary has to have at least 1 course in mission.
Yeah.
It didn't have any.
Etzitica. Got it.
Number 2, I'd like to see a mission center that's student-driven, but backed by the institution to help mobilize. Okay. Third, I want to write a little book in Spanish on missions for the local church, but with a Latin American colleague. Fourth, let me see. I wanted to see the beginnings of a mission agency in Guatemala, and I wanted to see the beginnings of a missionary training program.
Right.
And then finally, I wanted my church, El Camino, Guatemala City, which we had planted with some friends. I wanted to see it committed to the global vision of God. Well, the curriculum decision was made almost immediately.
Yeah.
Almost immediately, the Missiological Center,
Right.
which is still there.
Which is still there, yeah. The book.
The course, the course. Oh, and the first Sunday we're back in church, the lead elder, Dr. Abel Morales, who later taught missions at Teca after studying here, a medical doctor, he came up to me, he gave me a big abrazo, and he said, Canche, my nickname of a white-skinned person, and he said, Canche, the Holy Spirit has been dealing with us about our missionary responsibility as a church. Would you help us? And I realized that was the first Sunday that I was back.
Wow.
The seminary had already done their thing. There were 3 to go, and I realized that my goose is cooked.
You're going back.
You're going back. And I said, don't ever try to negotiate with the Almighty. You're just going to lose. So when it came time to depart,
to go back
to TED, I knew that it was time to leave Latin America.
Yeah.
And Paul Savoca was the president at that time.
Right,
and he and I had been in boarding school together. And actually, he's the one who tutored me in Hebrew here at seminary when I was flunking Hebrew, thanks to the brilliant Dr. Walke. But it wasn't his fault. It was my fault. But I had a history of almost flunking courses.
Yeah.
So I went in and talked to Paul. I said, Paul, I've been honest with you. This is what's happening.
Yeah.
And he said, Bill, if you follow what's God's purpose for you, that's what you're supposed to do.
Sure.
And God will provide here at Zetica.
Sure.
So I bless you.
Yeah.
So we go to TED's.
What year is this now?
This is now 85.
85, okay.
we put our house in Guatemala that we had built after the earthquake. We put it up for sale. It didn't sell for a year and a half. We put a down payment on a house in Deerfield, Illinois, and we found out that the owners had lied to us about the flood.
Oh gosh.
And so I'm caught in a law thing.
Oh gosh.
And we can't move into the house.
Yeah.
And then this is what happens. My beloved prophetic wife says to me one day, I come back from work. She says, "I need to talk to you." And whenever it starts that way, you sit down, take a strong coffee.
Take a big pause, yeah.
And she says, "I don't think this is God's place of protection and blessing for our family." And I remember where I was standing. I collapsed on the floor and sobbed. And I said, "Yvonne, don't do this to me." And she said, "Bill, we're here because of you.
Oh my goodness.
You are the one." And she said, "I'm not blaming you, but I'm just telling you this is what I think the Lord said."
Wow.
So I knew.
Wow.
And I'm saying, now I really don't understand the will of God.
Yeah.
But it was in that vacuum.
Yeah.
That World Evangelical Alliance comes into the picture.
Right.
Because the only one who understood my situation was David Howard.
Right.
Who had been my mentor since Urbana 76 or 67.
And he knew you as well as anyone else.
Yeah, he
knew
he
where.
had seen me as a challenging early adolescent in Costa Rica.
So let's get back to a question. Well, let's get to a question I want to ask.
Okay.
Because what we try to do in this podcast is just try to think through the topic of theological education, right? And as we think about and I wanted to set up this question by at least giving those that are watching a very brief overview of your background, the Mission Commission, your work in Latin America, being born as a missionary in Costa Rica, and you're negotiating with God and all these things, and going back and forth between the U.S. and Latin America and so on. But I know you've seen a lot around the world, and you've been involved in the Mission Commission in so many other ways globally. But you've also interacted with a lot of different training programs, and you yourself, whether it be in Latin America or here in the U.S., you've taught at different places. And so I want us to just kind of wrestle with this question. The question is, if you were to start a seminary today, and we can use the seminary type of the majority world, right? Not third world, but the majority world, global South, or many seminaries are mostly Bible colleges type. They're not necessarily doing graduate work, but if you were to start a training program, a school, to equip leaders for the church, what would be some of the things that today you think must be included in a program such as that?
That's a complex question. I know, but it's an extremely relevant one because we're in a time of sort of a boom of construction of new schools or revision of schools. I had 20 years of teaching in the formal graduate level, undergraduate, graduate level.
Right.
And then it was very interesting that when I went into the Mission Commission, our commitment was, how do we foster missionary training? How do we create new programs? And what does it mean to contextualize a missionary training program? So for another 20 years, I can actually calibrate 20 and 20. 20 teaching in formal education.
Right.
But asking questions only the last 5.
Yeah.
And then 20 in the non-formal,
through the Mission Commission.
Through the Mission Commission.
Right.
But not pitting it as a war against the formal structure.
Right.
Now, I did have some challenges, but we had the agenda that God gave us in the Mission Commission was, or the phrasing was, if it's local, that is Nigeria focused, let's say tribalism and persecution of the Nigerian situation, Nigeria deals with it.
Right.
If it's regional, tribalism in a larger context, then let the region deal with it. But if it's a global issue, we want to address it.
Okay.
So then the phrase that
you were leaving a lot of the training, the development of training programs, you were leaving a lot of that to the country or the region to develop on their own.
We would provide a seminar or a workshop on praying into existence a training program
for missionaries.
For missionaries.
Yeah.
So
and just to clarify, you're talking about missionaries from that context.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
So you're talking about, in this case, Nigerians.
Right.
Training Nigerians to be missionaries,
Exactly.
as opposed to Americans to go and be missionaries. Okay, got it.
Because when I was a kid, if they said a Nigerian missionary is going to speak to us tonight, it's an American who works in Nigeria.
Right.
Now you have to wait till he shows up or she shows up.
Right.
So the Dr. Ray Windsor of New Zealand, a veteran, a cardiac surgeon, first in India, later became principal at All Nations Christian College in the UK, and then returned to New Zealand to care for his aging parents, and then became a leader in New Zealand mission movement. And that's how I met him. But he was maybe 20 years my senior.
Okay.
He's the first one that said, "I can help you, and you need help." What is on your heart? I said, "Well, Ray, I'm not sure. Let's ask some others. What are some global needs?" And what began to pop up was this: what does a missionary training program look like? And what was so significant is that All Nations Christian College, which still exists in England, became a mother house. And people from Africa, Asia, Latin America, leaders, spent a term there just studying that model, because they had students who were, like I was a visiting tutor. My wife and I were visiting tutors, and I had people with a master's from Cambridge or Oxford, but I also had the diesel mechanic from the Logos ship. So the academic prerequisite was secondary. And they didn't offer a degree. They didn't. I don't think they even offered a certificate at the beginning.
And this was at All Nations.
At All Nations. And then Chris Wright. I was there when he was there. And there were some changes, and so. Now you can get a PhD through All Nations, but the academic prerequisite was not conforming to the known structure, and that became a critical issue. Now, I'm remembering one friend of mine in India who poo-pooed these little missionary training schools that aren't accredited. And I said, "What is accreditation?" Well, that sort of stopped the conversation. For us in the missionary movement, accreditation means that our graduates do that for which we have attempted to equip them to do. So if
you're measuring the effectiveness of the program based upon their ability to do the ministry work, right? Yeah, sure. Okay.
So in the beginning, none of the missionary training programs, and I probably had my fingers in about 30 of them.
Okay.
And I visited maybe 75 theological institutions of all levels around the world. The definition of excellence and access and accreditation were critical, because excellence is, do we do well what we purpose to do?
Yeah, sure.
Access is, who has access to this program?
Sure.
I'm speaking shortly at a Hispanic church here in the United States, and I know some of the demographics. Half of the congregation are illegals.
Yeah.
Half of the congregation may have completed primary.
Yeah.
And they want me to speak about Hispanics in the United States and the missionary challenge.
There you go.
So here I am at the tender age of 85, saying, Lord, have mercy, what do I do? So those key words, which I hadn't thought of in a long time, but excellence, access, accreditation, we had to redefine.
Yeah.
And one of the things...
And you were redefining it. I guess I'm trying to understand, because at the time, there was this growth in missionary activity and missionary movement coming out of, and it still is today, right? Today, we still see a lot of missionary activity and training developing out of the what is global South majority world context. So were you trying to respond to the growth in, or people asking for missionary training? What was driving? What was the demand driving you and others to seek ways to train missionaries?
One of the
in that context,
sure. One of the drivers was this unprecedented growth worldwide.
Right.
And in the Latin American mission movement, what was striking in those early decades, and I've been privileged to see this from the very, very beginning.
Right.
In the late 70s, early 80s, when I had to repent before God and say, God, I didn't think Latin Americans could be cross-cultural missionaries. Where is that attitude coming to? So God forgave me, and I made no deals with him. I just said...
You didn't negotiate on that one.
I didn't negotiate on that. So
but
we saw this need, but here's the other thing. We saw too many coming back early, wounded.
Okay. And they were, so at the time, let's go back for a second though, Bill. At the time when you say they were coming back wounded, and so where were they coming back from?
Well, I'm thinking of a couple that were graduates of the seminary that felt that God had called them to North Africa.
Got it.
And a church said, we'll support you.
Got it.
And so they took off with no preparation, no field team.
Okay.
No orientation.
No support.
The support from the church. But here's the other thing. We found, and the Philippines was a primary example, it was very easy for Filipino missionaries at that time to raise money to leave, but after 3 months. And so some people were calling 12 months long-term service.
Right.
And to me, it's not long-term.
Yeah.
So how do we prevent preventable attrition?
Right. And so you actually had, and we're talking about in the 80s, right? People from Latin America that sensed the call to go serve as missionaries in a whole nother continent. And I asked the question earlier about where did they come from, because I wanted to clarify whether they were coming back from another country within Latin America, which it could be, I guess. But what I'm hearing is that there's this birthing of worldwide missionary activity coming out of Latin America that didn't have the preparation, the training that was needed for them.
I think it would be important to note that a strong percentage of, let's say, the Brazilian missionary movement was within Brazil cross-culturally, or a tribal factor.
Right.
The same was in Guatemala.
Yep.
So I remember this a student, a lovely student of mine, who barely got into the seminary because she had a automobile electrical certification, and so they let her come in, and I said, oh well, okay, she's a lovely woman. God, just hope she gets married and has children. And excuse me for the racism or whatever it is, but I want her to land right. So she comes into my office. She said, Don Guillermo, I want to share with you some exciting news. I said, that's great. God has called me to be a missionary. And I was silent because I didn't know what to say to her. I said, well, tell me some more. I'm just asking for time.
Sure.
And I realized that I didn't even know how to pray for her. And that was in the early years at the seminary.
What was it that was missing? Why didn't you?
I don't think most of us as North Americans and the Latin Americans did not think that was, on the one hand, the North Americans, that Latins could do that or were supposed to do that.
Yeah.
It was from the West
to them
to the rest, which is a really poor way of bifurcating the world. But I also think that there was this feeling of many Latin Americans who said, that's not for us.
And we've come a long way since the 1980s.
Sure.
I mean, at this point, we have people in Latin America, the Caribbean, Cuba, there are people that are going all over the world, serving as missionaries nowadays. Going back to the missionary training.
Yeah.
So tell me then, as you were looking at the landscape, you're in the Mission Commission. You're seeing some growth in missionary activity, desires, and so on. What was it that you were trying to do and think about in terms of theological education, missionary training in theological education at the time, from a global perspective, as you were leading the Mission Commission? Because you talked about all nations for a few moments there earlier, but what was kind of coming together as you looked at what was happening in different parts of the world, and you were visiting all these schools and everything else? What was coming together in your own mind about what might be needed at during this moment, during this season, to prepare missionaries well, so that they're not coming back wounded or discouraged and not wanting to go back and so on? What did you see coming together that would have helped to shape your thinking at the time about what missionary training, and I use theological education with it, what was it coming together for you in that sense?
I'm really not sure, Mike. I have to ponder that one. I knew, and this is intriguing. I don't think I've phrased it this way. I knew that there was something missing. There was an ingredient missing. It was a major ingredient. It wasn't just that we needed a little more salt in the mixture. It was something is just not there. And to be honest with you, I didn't have the skill set. And that's when God brought to me Jonathan Lewis,
right,
who was thinking about this from the area of trade schools and equipping people to do a specific trade, and that was his PhD dissertation. And then the other was Rob Brunjolson, Canadian, and I think you know them both.
I know them both, yeah.
And Rob was a student of mine at TEDS,
right? Okay.
And took a course that I taught there on theological education in the Third World. And he wanted to do something on missionary training. I said, well, talk to John Lewis. And I think one of my most brilliant moves as an emerging leader, because that's what I call myself. I didn't use the word, I didn't self-identify as a leader until maybe almost a decade into my WA stuff.
Okay.
Yeah. Because I was afraid of that word.
Right.
I never wanted to be a leader. I never sought it, but it came to me.
It does sort of creep up on you after a while.
And then I realized that was the story of my father also. And that's what I developed in this book, Leading from Below. So the brilliant thing was that God led Jonathan to me.
Okay.
And he came to our first missionary training consultation in Guatemala. That was a massive failure. And it was my fault. And after it was over, he said, Bill, you need help, and I can help you.
Wow.
And so John worked with us for 14, 15 years.
With the Mission Commission?
With the Mission Commission.
Okay.
Self-supported. We never got any salary from WA.
Yeah.
At one point, the Mission Commission was broke. We looked at each other. What would we do if those totally broke? Well, we do the same thing. But so that was just the way it is. And so John.
So what did John bring?
John brought a capacity to think through a consultation with process goals and product goals.
Okay.
So here's a process we're going to go through.
Right.
And we saw these seminars, workshops in South America, New Zealand, and India, and the Philippines, and Africa, and even tried to do it in the United States. But the seminary world was locked out of.
Not ready for that.
It just couldn't handle it.
Yeah.
And so it was developing a profile of what, if we have a missionary training program, when this program is over, what are the values and the attitudes and the spiritualities and the competencies that we want to see? And it was a brainstorming with men and women who were passionately interested, not knowing where it was going to go, and that led to specific missionary training programs.
Got it. So you were doing these consultations?
Yeah.
And Jonathan was helping you with these?
Well, I did one, and then I realized.
Right, the one in Guatemala didn't work out so well.
And then we called them seminars, training seminars, equipping seminars.
Got it. But these seminars, who were you training?
Well, we had to get the pastors because in Latin America, the missionary movement is church-driven, not agency-driven.
Right.
So pastors with a missionary vision, and they were there.
Okay.
They were just being given a venue.
Okay.
And then there were already some not Lone Ranger missionary types, but men and women who had gone out at terrible personal cost with very little support, but they had experience.
Yeah, experience, but not the training.
So we had that first generation of reflective, which we call reflective practitioners.
Yeah.
That are practitioners of the missionary training, but how do we do this better?
So were you doing the same type of training in these other, like you mentioned New Zealand and the Philippines and Africa, were you doing the same type of training in those settings?
It was a similar format, but sensitive to different cultural dynamics.
Okay. As you did this missionary training, were there any, let's say, formal schools that were involved that sort of adopted what you were doing to help further train missionaries out of their more formal programs?
The first step that I remember taking was approaching a seminary like Seteca, or some other ones, and say, could we craft a 1-2 year program where students take the core courses in Bible, theology, ministry, but then we also have more missions courses, and we have built into this a significant non-formal community. So when they start, 2 weeks before they start, there's a retreat.
Yeah.
And we go off to some isolated place to meet God, meet each other, and build community. And And I confess that idea was sort of dead on arrival.
Oh, no.
Yeah, it's just, it's one of those things I look back and I say, oh, Jesus. And ironically, there's a young woman who's trying to revitalize the student mission movement at Seteca, and she's asking me to be her advisor. So I'm saying, this is really interesting. I left 1985, here we are, 2025, and God is letting me put my hand into the mixture
back
again.
into this. Yeah. If you were to, let's go back to the question I asked earlier too then. As you think about, and maybe let's stay in the missionary training world for a moment. Yeah, all right. So as you look at today, and this is a question I think that many are wrestling with even today when it comes to missionary training programs, and even missions departments and schools and so on and so forth. As you think about what is going on globally around the world today and the needs that are coming up in the area of missions and missionary training, what are some things that you think today we really need to put at the forefront of any type of preparation for a missionary today, whether it be someone here from the U.S. or maybe someone from outside the U.S., Latin America, Asia, Africa? What are some things from what you've seen and done over the years, Bill? What are some things you think that a missionary training program has to have today?
Oh, that's a heavy question because I've been mulling over it and talking to people, and I don't have easy answers.
Yeah.
I think that somehow God is brewing, and you and the ISET movement have your hand on that pulse. That when the formal theological program realize the danger of the bankruptcy of that model alone, thanks to the Germans, and they say, can we talk with a non-formal?
Yeah.
So if I were, like I think I have a finger on the pulse of seminaries that have closed or have closed their missions program, where are the students?
Right.
Well, we have to ask God, where are the students? Because I don't think God's finished with the United States.
He's not.
But what would it mean to launch a missions major that from the very beginning has, and this is an oxymoron, accredited non-formal component? So that we are going to have in America, maybe a 5-day retreat somewhere. And we're going to get away. But here's a mix or another ingredient, that it's saturated by a deep commitment to spirituality. Not sappy, pietistic, caricature spirituality, but there's something that, and actually, there are some seminaries that go back to their founders, and I think Dallas Seminary could be an example of that, to go back to examine the spirituality of the founders. Well, how are we far from that? And what would that look like in practical ministries? And then that program teaches classes. They go down to Guatemala, and they teach contextualization down there.
Yeah.
But we also need the gifted teachers for that.
Right. But it sounds to me that what you're suggesting is that for us to have missionary training, missions programs in schools, you're asking the question, how do we bring it into the formal, some of that more non-formal, the kind of the more the grassroots, the basic training, field ready stuff that sometimes might be missing in the more formal sector of training. And so I'm hearing you say that blending of the formal and non-formal is probably is very crucial for missionary preparation. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that when seminaries adopted the university model,
Yeah. Yeah.
and then when accreditation comes in, and when I don't like to say it, but I'll say it, elitist definitions of excellence take over.
Yeah.
Like I get sick to my stomach when I see a seminary that says we train leaders for excellence, whatever that means. And I'm just saying, oh, please, get away from me, get thee hence. So I think that the crisis has to be felt enough that somebody who has what I call the power to convene, says there's a group of about 12 of us that want to meet for a week to pray and listen to the Spirit and listen to the world. What does God want to do in the United States in terms of missionary training? And that's the, if I can make a mention, I don't know.
Sure.
You want to say something about this?
You can say it. Yeah.
Well, Mike knows this book because he endorsed it, but maybe he didn't have a choice.
No,
a friend.
That's not
but
true.
This book is on leadership, and it comes from 60 years of ministry in Latin America and then the global, and sensing, Mike, that my almost 20 years in Latin America were preparation for the 30 worldwide.
Right.
But the pre-global had its own unique value and importance.
Right.
It's not leading from the top. And what we found at the seminary in Guatemala, where I taught, is that the missionaries came, they had their own money, and there was no authority from the top other than their commitment to work under that authority. That said, if you don't shape up, you're out of here. Whereas the Latin Americans on staff, they're getting a salary.
Yeah.
They have to show, and so it's a different thing.
Different perspective.
But I sense that what the Lord led me into is a discussion, in some ways, leadership in the volunteer, not entrepreneurial world, but it's church leadership can be authority-based, depending on the theological and leadership style of the chief. It's building consensus. And this is what to me was important, because when I took over the Mission Commission, as I've said, I honestly didn't know who I was working for. I didn't know what I was supposed to do. I didn't know how we raise money. It was this very, very steep learning curve. But then once I got those skills, then, and I remember being asked to speak at a church on leadership, and I said, well, I'm not a leader. And the person who asked me said, well, if you're not a leader, who is? I said, well, I don't know, but I know I'm not. Because I had never sought it, but it came.
As we look at leaders today within theological education, right? What are some things that you would encourage them to be thinking about as they are trying to shape their programs? I know your book helps us to think about a number of things, but what are some things you think probably stand out the most to you as you think about, and you know, now, and I sometimes in some contexts, from what I've seen, leadership becomes a position of authority, a position of but even beyond authority, almost identity, right? It becomes, this is who I am now. I am the leader, and in some context where there's a very high honor shame type of context or setting, that leader is placed on a pedestal and they like being there, so to speak, right? And I want to be careful what I say here, but there are some leaders that are really enjoying that position because it just gives them a sense of purpose, identity, credibility, all these sorts of things. What is your position on all that? What are you thinking in terms of leadership, especially in terms of theological education?
Well, my leadership experience, I didn't know that I was doing this, but was in Latin America.
Right.
And then I went back and said, well, how in the world did I end up being a 33-year-old elder of a new church plant? Well, because I loved what I was doing, and I had shepherding gifts, and I had the time. I said, oh, that was an aspect of leadership. But I retrofit that much later. When I would be asked at the seminary in Guatemala, would you direct this missions conference? I said, yeah, sure, fine. You have to raise the money. Yeah, fine, I'll raise, that's fine. When it's over, I go back to teaching what I wanted to do.
Right.
And then the positions I would get, I wanted to pass them on to someone else, but not so I could leave, but so I could do something else or return to where I was, because I just loved the craft of teaching.
Yeah.
And I wanted to hone that craft. I had leaders, the president. I had a couple of sort of toxic, and I learned from them. I don't want to be that way. I almost left the field because of that.
Yeah.
And there's a very honest story in here called I Have Come, where God saves me from attrition, from failure, because I was on the cusp of throwing my towel in. Not Yvonne.
Yeah.
I. And then I had another leader. He never became the president. He became the vice rector, the vice president. He was a New Testament scholar. And I remember when he was dean, I remember walking behind him as he crossed campus, and he stooped down to pick up some trash. And then he just put it in the trash can. I said, how many people have walked by that trash and just left it there? Because that's not their job.
Right.
You know, we pay somebody to pick up the trash.
Right.
No, Stan Orth was his name. God bless you. You're now in heaven. But Stan taught me something. And from then on, whenever I would walk, as close as this last week, I had to pick up a piece of trash.
You can't go by. You can't go by because of Stan Orth.
Yeah.
Right.
And so Stan led from below.
Yeah.
But when he was dean and he had to write promotional letters, he would take me out to lunch. He said, I need some ideas. And I just had ideas just bubbling out of my heart. And he would say, okay, that's great. How would you write this letter? Let me send you a draft. So I experimented that way.
Why is it then that so many leaders have trouble picking up the trash on the side? And I'm using that metaphorically, right? Just in the sense of, why is it that they have trouble leading from below, willing to move into that space of leadership?
I don't know that I want to go on the record on here.
Yeah, well, that's okay.
I think it's a pride. I think it's an arrogance.
Yeah.
I don't want to stoop to do that.
Yeah.
It's false. It's pernicious. For in working on this book, Leading from Below, I read about 40 books on leadership.
And that's what I want to try to get to. What as you developed the book and as you thought about leadership, I mean, it's one thing to say to someone, lead from below, right?
Yeah.
But how do you help them to think through how to do that?
It has to be modeled.
Right?
It has to be modeled. Somebody has. In my case, it was David Howard.
Yeah.
Well, it was my father.
Yeah.
It was David Howard. It was Emilio Antonio Nunez.
Yeah.
Nunez came to the Bible Institute in Guatemala in the early 40s. He was brilliant. And he was studying with people who had not finished primary. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And then he comes on faculty, and he's a man of God. He's a man of God.
Yeah.
That's what he is. He's a man of God.
Yeah.
He learns English, comes to Dallas Seminary.
I know.
Gets the faculty award for, I don't know what it's called.
Right.
Goes to SMU, ends up Phi Beta Kappa.
Right.
Then comes back here years later, does the doctorate, gets the doctorate, the award doctorate.
PhD.
And in Latin America, the PhD. And in Latin America, nobody knows that.
Yeah.
No, nobody knows that because that wasn't Nunez's style. Nunez had the most sensitive sense of humor, and he had a raucous laugh that just enveloped us. Mm. But he never drew attention to himself, and he did not like administration. For a while, he was the president, and he said, "That's not me.
Wow,
let me teach."
But he was president for a while. What?
He was president for a while, but the shortest possible.
Okay. But
I've never met someone like him. So these three, and to them I dedicate the book. One of the books was something like Learn from the Giants.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Or another book, I think I comment on it, where the author has to tell us that he has a PhD.
Yeah.
I said, no, dude, you don't have to tell us that. You just lost credibility with some of your audience. But I think in my case, Mike, as God opened up leadership, I had to come to the point to accept that I was a leader.
Yeah.
But I knew what I didn't want to be like.
And maybe that's part of leading from below, is not really realizing that you are a leader. In other words, not pursuing that. You were not intentionally pursuing that. Going back to Nunez and others that might have served as models for you, I would imagine that their focus was not on that position, but their focus was to serve Christ, to serve Him. That was their primary aim. It wasn't the vocation itself. It was the call that they had on their lives for service of Christ. Yeah. Yeah,
and when my son David, who is a very gifted writer, was helping me shape this book after it was turned down a couple of times, he gave me a template. He said, "Dad, start with this, the structure." But he said at the end, before you talk about the lessons that you learned on leading from below, tell us about Jesus. And I think one of the few people that captures that spirit is Henri Nouwen in his most powerful little book on leadership that he gave in the previous millennium and century. Yeah. And so I quote him a number of times because
I know
that is the book that most shaped me.
And it is focused on our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ.
It is.
That's what it's centered on. Yeah. Well, Bill, thank you for doing this with me today. I know that there's so many other things that we could be diving into as we have spent time together. And those of you that have been watching, thank you for being with us. Hopefully this was an instructive and informative time together that you've enjoyed. And as you think about theological education and you think about what is to come, continue to join us as we continue to try to reimagine theological education together.